President Joe Biden putting the pressure on Chinese metal. In a campaign stop in the steel city of Pittsburgh, he called for triple the tariffs on metal products, including steel and aluminum.
Look, right now, my U.S. trade representative is investigating trade practices by the Chinese government regarding steel and aluminum. If that investigation confirms these anti-competitive trade practices, then I'm calling on her to consider tripling the tariff rates for both steel imports and aluminum imports from China.
Biden wants to raise tariffs to 25%. By comparison, the current tariffs are sitting at 7.5%. So they were imposed by former President Donald Trump. Both have been trying to win votes from unions and blue-collar industries. The new tariff hike could invite blowback from China. The Biden administration assures that the tariffs are necessary for national security to protect one of our most critical sectors. So on top of the tariffs, it's working to prevent China from flooding the market with cheap imports or skirting tariffs by importing through Mexico. The White House is trying to assure Americans that the tariff hike won't worsen inflation. But, if metal prices do go up, it could increase costs for cars, construction, and materials and more. So to get another perspective on Biden's latest action, I spoke to Hudson Institute senior fellow Riley Waters. So here's how he feels about the tariffs. Riley, great to have you here today. I wanted to get your thoughts on this. Biden thinking of raising tariffs on Chinese steel products and aluminum as well. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, it seems very political, considering we import so little steel from China. The usage of Chinese steel in the United States is not even 1%. And so he could call for a tripling. He could call for a quadrupling. We can increase it by 10 times. It's not really going to matter that much at the end of the day because we use so little. So it really does seem like it's not going to have that much of an effect, other than the consideration that, of course, the U.S. election is later this year. I think this is really an effort to draw in union support ahead of November.
So, of course, where Biden is coming from with this, and he has mentioned this, is to protect the American steel industry. Will this better the industry? You mentioned that we don't even import that much steel from China.
Yeah, it really is a question of efficacy here. I don't think it really will have a meaningful effect on U.S. production or usage of steel, which means it's really not going to have any effect on the workers themselves. If we're looking at all steel industry right now, the mentioning of the Nippon Steel deal is actually, I think, quite important to consider, because Nippon Steel acquisition of U.S. Steel could actually support U.S. labor, but Biden, of course, continues to come out in opposition of that. For whatever reason, he feels that some of these archaic views on trade and investment will somehow support U.S. industry, when I think history has gone to show the latter. It's not really true anymore. It's really more protectionist than anything at this point.
We've seen Trump do something similar, and there was a lot of talk about a trade war between China and the U.S. How is this move by Biden going to impact U.S. trade relations?
That's actually a really great question. There's a couple things to consider. If we're talking about shipbuilding in the petition that USTR will investigate, it seems very narrow, or potentially very narrow, so it may not escalate into the broad trade war that we saw in the 2018s and 2019s. But when Biden called for a tripling of steel tariffs in respect to the past 2018-2019 investigation, all very legalese here, that could potentially expand on that. We do have many tariffs on Chinese imports still in place, and the Chinese have very many tariffs on U.S. imports. And so while it's very narrow, and so I think not really risking an escalation at this point, it does, I think, feed into that conversation. How much longer are we going to continue this back and forth? How long are we going to continue to impose new tariffs without actually finding solutions? Because we do have a trade agreement with China in place. They haven't fully committed to it, and so we could continue to see this escalation, especially especially if administration changes, it could definitely continue to go further, unless, for example, Congress were to step in at some point and say, we want to put limits on what USTR can do and what the White House can do in this matter.
Okay, maybe just one more thing. What do you think is going to be the response from Beijing after this?
Well, the response in the past, if we're looking at the trade war, was very proportionate. And so whatever the United States determines, because that's the point, they still have to do an investigation. They still have to determine how far they're going to go with tariffs. I could expect to see a measured response, reciprocal, maybe not necessarily on similar industries like we saw, but like we saw in the trade war, they did increase tariffs up to a certain amount of annual imports, targeting things like agricultural products. Those tend to be very popular, and some other goods that China imports from the United States.
All right, Riley Walters, Hudson Institute, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you for having me.